But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause for our third storyteller for the day, Miss Beautiful Christina Chiu.
Hi. So my parents and my family moved from the Bronx when I was around 6 to a suburb outside of New York City. It was a pretty affluent suburb. And when I got there, I realized for the first time that it was probably not so great to be Asian. And the reason I felt this was because, well, I was one of the few Asian kids there, but also some of the kids, would play soccer and some of the kids would jump rope. But then some of the kids took a lot of time to remind me that I was different. And they would say things like, oh, Chinese, Japanese dirty knees. And of course, I would be the one to go home and try and scrub my knees. So like I had I just did not know what was going on. And they would say, go back where you came from. And of course, I'm like, do you mean the Bronx? Like it was so confusing. So I had this idea about being Asian and it wasn't a good one. And I guess I grew up thinking like, knowing that I wasn't the standard of beauty and you know what, I would never be. And I think that kind of thing just kind of lives with you. And by the time I got into high school, I had a cousin who got her eyes done. And for those of you who don't know, a lot of Asians will um, get like an epicanthic fold because they want to have larger looking eyes and a fold. And so basically it's like a scar. And so my sister, of course, is like totally grossed out. She's like disgusted that my cousin would do such a thing. And, like in a certain way, intellectually anyway, I was pretty not great with it either. But then I swear, if someone had said, you know what, you got a new nose, I would have been like, really, one with a bridge? Like, really, one that's not flat? Like, I would have been there. And it was kind of interesting because you'd always hear people say, you should love who you are, right? And I'd always wonder what that meant. Like, how do you do that? Like, that's like impossible. Like, what do you mean? Like, how do you go there, right? So I would like J. Crew myself, right? If I couldn't be it, then at least I could dress it and act it and, go as far as I could, right? So by college, I'm like all J. Crewed out and I'm like talking the talk. And I have my new friends, I'm a freshman, and we're all excited. We go to a party and we're all drinking, and someone says, chink. And I'm the only Chinese person there, so I know it's directed at me. And I'm like, what? Right? So I leave the party and I go back to my dorm and I'm trying to sort out what happened, what is going on here. And I sit down at my desk and I start to write. And this amazing thing happens. It's like I'm there, but like I'm not there. It's like I sit down and like hours go by and I've transcended time or something. It's like I'm so absorbed and passionate, and my heart is there, and my words are there, and they matter. Of course, I send this off to the college paper, and the next thing I know, the next day, it's on the front cover, and people are talking about it, and it ends up starting a year-long discussion about race and racism. What's racism? So I end up becoming a writer, obviously. I become absolutely addicted because when I'm in this space, I feel absolutely powerful. I feel beautiful. I feel like nothing can bring me down, right? I'm just so in it. So I go on to write a book called Troublemaker and Other Saints. It's a collection of stories. And it's about stereotypes and what it's like to be jammed into a shape that actually doesn't suit you. And then I start my next novel, and it's about a woman who goes into the fashion industry, and it's about beauty and how this Asian American woman, this Chinese American woman, navigates the intersections of race and gender. And all the questions I've ever had about beauty, I'm dealing with in this book. And of course, my book launches during COVID, right? I've spent like 14 years writing this book and it launches during COVID. But you know what? Worse things could happen, right? Like there are horrible things happening. I live in New York City. It's like the epicenter of the epidemic. We're losing people like constantly to this virus. I know I need to wear a mask, but very early on in the epidemic, a woman who's in Midtown gets attacked for wearing a mask because she's Asian. And I don't feel so safe anymore. I'm in New York City, one of the most diverse cities in the universe, and for the first time ever, I don't feel safe. And I don't want to put on that mask, and I resist wearing it. But by mid-April, New York City has lost maybe 10,000 residents to COVID. It's like no joke. And I'm like, I need to protect my family, but what? Am I gonna, if I wear a mask, I'll get attacked. If I don't wear a mask, I'll give my family COVID. It's like, what? That's crazy. So I make this decision. I think about why this is happening, right? Why am I resistant? Talk to a friend and I'm like, I'm afraid to wear a mask. Are you? And she's Asian American also. And she's like, yes. And she says, did you hear about that incident with that woman? And I'm like, oh my God. And we realize we're not the only ones who are scared. So when I was doing research on my book Beauty, I started shoemaking because, I want to learn about designing and all that stuff. And I started to fall in love with shoemaking, a lot like I fell in love with writing. I would just sit down and 10 o'clock, I'm working on it. And I look up at the clock, it's like 3 o'clock, I've forgotten my kids. That's how much I love it. That's how passionately I feel about it. Right. And the COVID experience is so strange to me because anti-Asian sentiment's on the rise. And, the president is going on about how it's a Chinese virus and it's a China virus and Kung flu. It's like so funny, right? No, it's like so funny, right? So I decide I need to wear a mask. And the way I'm going to do it is like this. When I was shoemaking, I made a pair of boots out of my favorite fabric. It's a Mary Mako fabric. It's white and it has these huge red flowers. And the flowers are like vibrant and alive and cheerful. And that's me, right? That is me. So I make myself a face mask. The next day, I'm on my way to the market. I cross paths with this woman and she pauses and there's that moment, right? I'm like, it can go either way, right? And she says, I love your mask. It's beautiful. And I'm like, it totally crystallizes in my mind. I'm like, that's right. Of course it's beautiful. I made it. I am it. I am that, right? And so much about beauty for me, I realize, is about being in that place, those moments when things are just so beautiful that time becomes irrelevant. And you know what? When I'm in those spaces, it doesn't matter if someone says something, like no one can take that away. It's there. And I just feel like it's the moment when you connect with yourself that's what they're talking about. When people say you should love yourself, it's there. Everyone has it. It's that moment when you feel so passionate and beautiful, and you are. Thank you.
Yes. Pick yourselves all with me. A round of applause for Christina, ladies and gentlemen.
Tremendous. Good job.
Amazing. I saw your little heart, Jessica. I can't see your face, but I saw your heart and your claps, and we appreciate you and everybody else who has been showing so much support for our storytellers. Amazing, Christina.